Known as the Green Island, Sao Miguel is a beautiful volcanic island located in the middle of the North Atlantic Ocean, a little more than halfway from North America to continental Europe. It's the largest of a chain of islands called the Azores, under the Portuguese flag. We had a free stopover here on our Madeira flight, so it made a great add-on to our trip. The Azores continues to experience a boom in tourism like much of Portugal and has quietly become a hot destination for North Americans this summer. We based ourselves out of Ponta Delgada, the capital city, for a week. Compared to Madeira, Sao Miguel is much quieter at about half the population and enjoys balmy weather all year round. If you're interested in visiting Madeira, click on the link to see how we spent 2 weeks there. There's definitely lots to do on Sao Miguel. It's more of a rolling pastoral landscape than the steep hillsides you find in Madeira. You won't find bananas growing, but picture cows grazing on dairy farms on top of hillside cliffs and green tea plantations. At the end of this video, you'll find our budget and accommodations guide with tips on how we organized this trip, so be sure to watch for that. Portuguese is a complex language, so please excuse any fumblings. I really did try my best. The town of Ponta Delgada is similar to Funchal in Madeira, but in a smaller, more compact way. It's very walkable and the streets are cobbled and narrow. You'll see many historic buildings and architecture in the town as well. This bronze sculpture of the Archangel Michael, patron saint of the island, stands over the town hall square in Ponta Delgada. The city gates, or the Portas da Cidade, is also a well-known architectural site that was built in the 18th century, and you can see the Moorish influence here. The island has been welcoming tourists for some time and is a popular cruise stop with a city port providing access to the island. It seems to be a good balance of locals versus tourists in spring at least, and many of the shops and small restaurants in town were not just tourist-oriented, which is also nice to see. Sao Miguel itself was largely uninhabited until around 1436 when Portuguese mainlanders began settling here. It's absolutely mind-blowing just thinking about how long ago that was. The island has a large agricultural base, as you can find tea farms, fruit farms, and of course, dairy farms from which its famous cheeses are made. Speaking of dairy, the Azores is an important dairy-producing region for Portugal, accounting for over a third of the total Portuguese dairy production, and Sao Miguel accounts for almost 90% of all the milk produced in the Azores. You'll find cows everywhere, on the cliff tops, on the hillsides, and on the trails. We even saw cows being milked by the roadside using mobile milking machines. As a result, the dairy cow is ubiquitous to the island, showing up everywhere in the souvenir shops. In Ponta Delgada, the best place to head to for locally produced cheese is the Prince of Cheese shop, with similar offerings at the King of Cheese, a few doors down. Both are owned by father and son. You can sample the cheeses to pick your favorites, and then they'll also vacuum pack it for travel as well. But just check your country's restrictions on whether you can bring dairy products in or not. You'll also find many other items like jams, peppers, tea, and honey, all made in the Azores. Also in town, I like visiting the local markets to see what's growing, but in the spring it's a bit quiet. Not far from our hotel, we found a gem of a little shop called Be Nature, and they sold locally made soaps, spices, and souvenirs at really great prices. A short drive from town is Cermaica Viera, the local ceramics factory owned by 5 generations of the same family since 1862. They produce beautiful handmade pottery, and if you're lucky, you can see the artisans at work as well and a view of the studio. Second to the dairy industry, pineapple production is also quite an important part of the island, and you can visit several plantations to see how it's grown. These are not the large outdoor plantations you might have seen in Hawaii, but are more like greenhouse farms as the climate can be a bit cool for the pineapple plant. The variety here, though, is a unique strain to the island and is said to be entirely edible, unlike most pineapples. We didn't put that to the test though, but they are smaller with a sweet tart profile. If you enjoy tea, you will love visiting the 2 tea plantations on the north coast as we did. Porto Fomoso is the smaller of the 2 and has a much more intimate feel. You are welcomed by a host with a short video and then treated to a complimentary tea service to sample their teas. Nearby Gorreana is a much larger facility dating back to 1883, making it the oldest tea plantation in Europe. There's a self-guided walkthrough of how the tea is processed along with samples to try. The gift shop has a large selection of affordable teas and makes a great gift to take back home. Across the road, you can also freely wander up to the terraced tea fields and enjoy the expansive view of the ocean beyond. With its coastal beauty, a drive around the island will easily be filled with stops at the Miradouros or lookouts, and this island takes it to another level, many with beautiful landscaping and gorgeous overlooks on cliffs and the small paths that you can wander. The fog does roll in, so just be mindful of that on the higher altitude lookouts. In the middle of the island is Lagoa do Fogo, a picturesque volcanic crater lake. There are a couple ways to visit this. You can either view it from the Miradouro lookout, or either hike directly to it from the southern part of the island. Strangely, they aren't close to one another, but we ended up visiting both. We hiked to Lagoa do Fogo via a 12-kilometer round-trip loop going counterclockwise, and it starts with a very steep 3-kilometer ascent, but you get a beautiful view approaching the lake. The route back follows a scenic levada, and you could do this out and back instead, or clockwise to avoid that steep uphill climb. On the north central coast, we stopped to check out the surfers at the beach in Santa Barbara. It's a very walkable beach with a wide sandy shoreline if you're not into surfing. The area of Furnas is really unique. Rich in volcanic activity, it's known for the natural hot springs and geothermal activity. We explored the calderas da Lagoa das Furnas right at the lake. The area even has its own natural slow cooker, where a traditional stew is made by local restaurants right in the hot earth. There's an entrance fee to the park, and within it you can pay an additional fee to visit a private botanical garden. We chose to do the hike around part of the lake. It was a bit cold that day, so we didn't make the entire circle, and we missed seeing the chapel on the lake. The town of Furnas itself is also nice to walk around, and this is where you'll find the famous hot springs. You'll need an old swimsuit though, which we didn't bring, as the water is a bit muddy. I was in search of a shop that made soaps out of the camellia flowers growing in the area, but I couldn't find it. In hindsight, we would have liked to stay a couple nights at the Terra Nostra hotel. It would definitely have been a bit more relaxing to base ourselves here and to explore this part of the island with less driving around. A nice perk is you'll get free admission to the hot spring pools and can enjoy it either late or early in the day when the crowds have left. Hiking in Sao Miguel is a much more laid-back affair than in neighboring Madeira. While the landscape is somewhat less dramatic, the hikes are quite unique and much less crowded, allowing you to enjoy the walks peacefully. We also found the trailheads to be more accessible with easy parking. This hike, Rocha da Relva, was a short but steep round-trip route to a small settlement at the bottom of the cliff, where we found a Canadian flag to welcome us. If you like waterfalls, you'll enjoy hiking the Felix Mill Loop Trail, where we crossed at least 3 waterfalls. Just over 6.5 kilometers round trip, it's an easy, well-maintained walk with just a few steep sections to navigate. There's even a public toilet available on the route, which isn't the case with many of the hikes on Sao Miguel. It's also accessible from different points, but we kept to the navigation on all trails. The highlight of the island is the Sete Cidades area in the northwest and is a well-known poster child for the tourist industry. From the busy Miradouro at the top, we hiked the rim of the caldera before making our way down to the town of Sete Cidades. Don't be taken aback by the crowds at the top. It was so quiet when we hiked it. I would say this is the hike not to be missed. But make sure you go on a good day because the fog can roll in and obscure the view from the top. Just stunning on a beautiful day like this. We hiked it clockwise and would recommend this direction. At the bottom, we stopped for a nice coffee break at the first cafe we came across. We explored the town and hiked around the lake and then headed back up. Parts of the uphill section are a bit sketch with some landfalls, and we had read on some reviews that it was actually closed. We passed one dicey area, but otherwise it was a nice ascent back up to our car, and definitely easier than backtracking our route. Check the trail conditions if you do decide to go. Still northwest is the picturesque beach town of Mosteiros. It has a beautiful bay with a black sand beach. The sand is actually sparkly. We walked along the coast to view the Ilha dos Mosteiros just offshore, for which the town is famous for. Check out the toilet with the most amazing view. There are a few lighthouses around the island, and the one we did visit was Miradouro da Vista dos Barcos on the east end. It's worth the effort to get there. A super steep paved road, but don't do what we did and try to drive down it. The local farmer at the top told us no problem, but it is worse than a roller coaster ride. I really thought our little car would flip over the cliffside. Definitely park at the lot at the top. Back in town on the north end, you can visit the free Jardim Borges, named after the owner and founder. It was built between 1858 and 1861. Also mind-blowing when you think of it because the Canadian Confederation that created Canada wasn't until 1867. The garden is home to an incredibly large ficus tree and what appears to be a banyan tree with large mats of aerial roots hanging from its branches. On the south coast, high above the town of Vila Franca do Campo, is a chapel called Ermida de Nossa Senhora da Paz. We spotted it from the highway and it's worth the stop. To access the chapel, there's a stairway of about 100 steps with 10 landings, depicting scenes of the life of Jesus Christ. Built in the 18th century, it has a panoramic view of the town below. The town itself is interesting to stop at. We came for the specialty tea cakes made at a cafe called Queixadas do Margado and met a fellow traveler who we chatted with. The cakes are an eggy, dense custard tart and were delicious, as was the carrot cake. We also came across a church procession in town, so it was nice to watch it go by. Overall, we enjoyed our week on San Miguel, and especially the relaxed pace of life here. There's a fair amount of elevation as you drive to the north and central parts of the island, and will be affected by the weather and fog that seems to roll in and out. In Ponta Delgada, we saw some major construction of new buildings, a sign of a booming economy. Driving in Sao Miguel is less technical than in Madeira, as the roads are wider once you get out of the city. Ponta Delgada itself, though, has very narrow streets, so a small car is highly recommended. When parking, fold your mirrors in, and when walking on those tiny sidewalks, hold your bags inside as it could get hooked onto a passing car. This was told to us by some locals. We traveled in late spring, too early to see the hydrangeas bloom, but we could just imagine how amazing it is as we spotted the early buds everywhere on the road and on the trails. I would definitely recommend visiting in June when they're in bloom, as it's quite unique to the landscape. If you enjoyed watching this video, be sure to like and subscribe. We would be so grateful. Now for the budget. San Miguel is still an affordable travel destination. We spent €812 or 1,200 Canadian dollars on accommodations and the car rental for a week. As we lost a couple of days due to the Madeira delay, we chose to extend our trip and had to spend an additional €327 or 485 Canadian dollars for an extra 4 nights. We applied for compensation online for those lost days, but we're still waiting to hear back from the airline. Many of the Airbnbs are locally owned, which is nice to see. We had a modern apartment right in town. It was spacious with a full kitchen and laundry. We also spent 4 extra nights at a hotel for our extended stay that was even more central to the restaurants and shops. It was a restored historic department store from the early 20th century, and it had so much character and all of the modern amenities. Many places do not have parking, which presents a daily challenge. All of the in-town street parking is either metered or paid. There are a couple of free parking lots with easy walking to the main shopping area, but they fill up quickly. Street parking is free after 8 p.m. and if you park overnight on the street, you can put a little extra money in the meter the night before and it will pick up in the morning, buying you a little extra time if you're not an early bird. As we had a kitchen for our Airbnb, we made many meals at home. Groceries are reasonably priced as well, and there are several stores within walking distance in town. You can also find a wide range of restaurants in Ponta Delgada, and some of the more affordable places are around 15 to 20 euros per person for main dishes at dinner time. Car rentals are a little less expensive than Madeira. We had an automatic economy car for 238 euros, including insurance, which I would recommend. You won't need a car in town, but definitely to explore the island, as public transit is not as accessible or convenient. I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'd love to hear your thoughts and comments. See you on the next trip.